So in lesson 13 we are going to look at behavior-driven development. And yesterday we saw fitness as a way that in a wiki you specify your tests. And today what we're going to look at behavior-driven development, where you specify your test in a plain text file instead of a wiki. But you still have to do some programming. That's the difference here. So what's the idea of behavior-driven development? First of all, we write basically our acceptance criteria in a text file in the form of given, when, then. So what you see here is I have a user story. In behavior-driven development they call it a feature. It's the same thing. As a user, I want to do some activity so that I get a business goal. Now this user story or feature, we can write multiple acceptance criteria. And we saw one of the ways to write acceptance criteria is in given, when, then format. And that's what you do in behavior-driven development. So for a feature, I write multiple, we call it a scenario, in given, when, then. So given a certain precondition, when I do an action, then this should be the postcondition. Given I have a calculator whose value is 0, when I add 3, then the value of the calculator should be 3. When I have a counter with current value 10, when I click increment, when I select increment, the value of the counter should be, did I say 11? Should be 12. So I can have multiple scenarios, but I write them in text. And then what I have to do, so yesterday we wrote a test as a wiki table, an HTML table. Well, if you run it, then still you need a fixture, sort of the glue that connects your table to whatever you want to test. And we looked at HSEC, that's a plugin that is a fixture to test web applications. But with behavior-driven development, you also need a sort of, they don't call it a fixture, but a steps file, where you write a Java code that is executed by running your scenarios. So what you see here is that here's my Java code. We're going to look at the details. And I have here method A, B, and C. And I annotate them with add given, add when, add then. And the idea is then when I run my scenario, when I run my given, when, then file, Cucumber will execute these methods. And these methods will do something. So let's say that we have given I have a calculator given I have a new calculator, it starts with 0. When I add 3, the calculator's value should be 3. So when I run it, Cucumber will call first method A. What do you do in method A? So you as a program has to write it. Calculator is new calculator. Then when I add 3. So in method B, what will it do? It will call calculator.add3. In the then I say, then the value of the calculator should be 3. So method C, what will it do? It will call calculator.getValue, and in that method is an assert that calculator.getValue is 3. So the main idea, you write for user stories acceptance criteria in given, when, then format. Then you write the glue code that is called when you run your acceptance criteria. And that glue code will call the system under test and do the things. And there you have your asserts. That's what you do in behavior-driven development. What is the advantage, or why do you want to do it? Well, first of all, for my user stories, I want to write acceptance criteria anyway. So now I write them all in given when then. What's the advantage? I can now use a tool, and we will use Cucumber, that's the most used tool, but in .NET it's called SpecFlow. You also have JBehave. There are different tools that can do this, but Cucumber is a very popular tool. And that tool will then run basically your scenarios, your given when then scenarios. So these scenarios is now, we call it a living document. It is both your acceptance criteria, so your requirements, and your test. So you put the requirements and test in one file. It's one and the same thing. And everybody can read it. It's in the language of the business. It's just plain text. And you can run it. That's the advantage. So again, the three amigos, similar with Vitnessa that we saw yesterday. And often when you talk with the product owner and the product owner explains something, then often you have, yeah, I think I understand it, but it's not completely clear. Can you give an example? So an example often makes things clear, and typically multiple examples. So let's say you're talking with the product owner and, okay, what are the requirements for passwords? What do you want for passwords? And the product owner says, well, I want good passwords. Okay, what's a good password? And then maybe there's not a good example because the product owner might not know what is a good password. But let's say this product owner knows what to do. So the product owner says, well, a password should be 8 characters long, and there should be a letter, or there should be an other character than a letter in there, and there should be a number in there, and get all these things, and then you say, okay, give an example. Is this a good password? No, that's not a good password, and because of this and this. Is this a good password? Yeah, that's a good password. And this? Well, that's more a weak password. So this, and this, these examples, you can use in your scenarios, in your tests, basically. In your given when then. Given or when I use this password, then the system says that's a weak password. When I use this password, the system says, or the system, you can just log in correctly. So I use these examples in my given when then tests, basically. So behavioral driven development, that's the name. If you use it like this with scenarios and given when then, and you can run it, is also called specification by example. So these given when thens is basically specification. By example, you give a lot of examples. It's the same name, or it's a different name for the same technique. Specification by example or behavioral driven development. Many projects use this these days. So let's look at an Hello World example. So I have my system under test is a simple Java class here, a calculator with an add method. So that's simple, a calculator. It has a known value, and the add, you add a value and it returns the new value. Then I write a scenario. So I have a user story I can calculate with a calculator. What's the business value? I can calculate. I don't have to calculate in my head, but I have a calculator. So I have here a scenario, and the scenario has a name, add a number, and it is given I have an add calculator with value 5. So my calculator starts with value 5. So actually I do need a constructor. I didn't show that here, but I have a constructor where you can set the value. And when I add 3, then the outcome should be 8. That's my given when then scenario. So it's an example basically. Then I have to connect that if I run this, I should call this calculator. And that's what you do in the steps. So you have scenarios. If you run the scenarios, steps are called. The steps call the system under test, in this case the calculator. So I have here, I didn't show all the steps here, but I have calculator steps. In there I have a calculator. And here you see my first method here is given. And then you see here an add calculator with value and then some variable. That's this 5 here. And here's my method. There's a method with a certain name. The name doesn't matter. But it gets a value in as an argument. And basically what you do, create a calculator with this value. In this case 5. So when I run this scenario with Cucumber, what Cucumber will do is it does pattern matching, it does string matching. It looks like, okay, here's a string, an add calculator with value, and then it sees the, oh, the 5 should be a parameter. Do I have a method that's annotated and it has this string here, an add calculator with value? And that's exactly what I have here, an add calculator with value. And it says, oh, here's the variable, the argument. So this string here matches with this string. So if Cucumber sees, hey, there's a match, it runs that method. So it will call this method and a calculator with value 5 is created. And then similar with the next one, I add with the variable 3 or an argument 3. So there is underneath here a method which has when and then the text I add, and it will run that one. So that's what actually Cucumber does. It's actually very simple. It does pattern matching. So let's look at our example. This is our complete example. I have a calculator. This is my user story. I want to use a calculator so that I can calculate with numbers. It's not very fancy, but it's my user story. Then I have two scenarios for the user story. In this case, I have two scenarios for add. I have a calculator with value 0. I add 3. The outcome should be 3. Then I have a calculator with value 5. I add 3. The outcome should be 5. That's my scenario. My examples, how I want my calculator to work. Then my steps. So maybe let's first look at the calculator. That's just a calculator with, in the constructor you can set the value. And you can add, subtract, you can get value, and you can multiply. Then my steps is then, here, I need a method which is annotated here with, I have an add calculator with value, because I use that here and here. So I only need one step because it's called it for both scenarios. So this basically create a calculator with this value. So this means here, it's a regular expression, 0 or actually 1 or more digits. That's basically what this means. I'll come back on this, but this is a regular expression, so that matches on any number that I have in my feature file. So in my feature file here I have 0, here I have 5. I could also have 55 or 100, 100. So this basically matches any number of digits. Similar here, I add with any number of digits. Well, I have that here, and I have that here. In this case, it's both 3, could also be something else. So that matches. So when first it will do this, create a calculator, then I say I add 3. What will it do? Calculator.add 3. So now value is 0 plus 3. So value is now 3. Then I say the outcome should be 3. So that matches here. The outcome should be, and then any number of digits, that's my 3. So here I get 3 in, and here's my assert. I have an assert equals, it should be an assert that. Here that the outcome should be calculator.getValue. They should be the same. Otherwise my test fails. So this is basically a unit test, but I write it in such a way that I can call it from a feature file, from a text file with given when then, with Cucumber. Now, how this method is, the name of this method doesn't matter. If you call it Santa Claus, it will work also. The name of the method doesn't matter. This text does matter. That needs to match exactly with this text here. So if there's a typo, Cucumber will say there's nothing that matches. And then whenever I have an argument, I can here, it's an integer in this case, this means any number of digits. So then here's my calculator. Now there's one more class that we need, and we need that in order to run this as a unit test within your IDE. I use Eclipse here. That's the only reason why I need this class. So typically when are these tests run? That's typically you have a continuous integration server like Jenkins or something like that, or you run it when you do a Maven install or whatever. Then you might want to run this test, so you can configure your environment that these Cucumber tests are run whenever you want to. We will not do that. We will not going to use Jenkins or Maven or whatever. What we will do, we run it from within the IDE. So that's why I need this class here. Doesn't matter how it's called, but you say run with Cucumber. So you run it with a Cucumber. Cucumber is just a framework that can run feature files. And then you have to set some options here. And the important options are this one here. Where do I find the feature file? Well, in my case, it's in the folder Cucumber. And there in the folder Cucumber, on my class path, there is a file calculator.feature. So let me show that here. This is Eclipse here. Where does the feature file go? In source test resources. That's a sort of Maven convention. Whenever you have resource files, like property files or image files or whatever, or feature files, they always go in the resource directory. So we have source main resources, source test resources. Well, now it's a feature file from Cucumber, so it belongs to test. So I put it in source test resources, calculator.feature. So here I specify it's in the folder Cucumber and it's called calculator.feature. You see here, it's in the folder Cucumber and it's a calculator.feature. That's how it's called. So I have to tell Cucumber where do you find the feature file. The second thing I have to tell Cucumber, where do you find the step files? That's what I have here. Test.steps. Test.steps is basically here. It's in source test Java. I have a folder, test.steps. In that folder, you find the feature files. in this case calculated steps.java. So I have to specify the folder where you find the steps and the folder and the feature file. That's what I do here. And this file I can run as a JUnit test. So I right click it, say run as JUnit, and then it will run. It will go to the feature file, do the pattern matching, and call the specific, Cucumber calls the specific methods. And then when everything runs, then this is my output. Everything is green, everything runs fine. And when there's an error, it's red. And it will also print in the console what it did. So for everything that it did, you can see in the console that it's executed. So you see here 2 scenarios, also here 2 scenarios and 6 steps. So we have 3 steps in this scenario, 3 steps in this scenario. This is Hello World Cucumber. The nice thing about this is the product owner understands this, can even write his own test. Everybody's able to write given when then, as long as you follow this format with the text, because that has to match. But whenever the text is not correct, Cucumber will tell you it's not correct. But we do this together with the business. We can tell the product owner, ask the product, is it correct? Is this the way an add method on a calculator should work? And I know we all know how a calculator works, but in general, these acceptance criteria are more business related. And when we run it, we are sure you test the requirements. Test and requirements are one and the same. Now, this given when then is a certain language. And the language we call Gherkin. Gherkin is the name they used for the given when then language. So Gherkin, Cucumber, very close. So it's a language for the business, readable by the business. And you can use different languages. You can do it in English. There's also support for, I don't know, Chinese or whatever language you want to use. And then Cucumber is a tool that understands Gherkin. And that Gherkin is also used in SpecFlow or in other tools. And it has a number of keywords. So you see here the given when then, but also other keywords. So we're going to look at all these different keywords. So first the given when then. Here's an example. Given my shopping basket is empty, when I add the book Harry Potter to my shopping basket, then my shopping basket should contain 1 copy of Harry Potter. That's how my shopping basket, my shopping cart should work. Also, given my shopping basket contains 1 copy of Harry Potter, when I add the book Harry Potter to my shopping cart, it needs to be the same version then, my shopping basket should contain 2 copies of Harry Potter. So the quantity should have become 2, instead of I have 2 cart lines with Harry Potter. So this is basically requirements, examples of acceptance criteria. You also can use an AND. And an AND you can use for given and you can use for when. So here's an example when I use it for the then. Given my shopping basket contains Harry Potter, I add Harry Potter again, then my shopping basket should contain 2 copies, and I should see a warning, book already existed in basket. Are you sure you want to add another copy? So instead of writing in the then my shopper basket should contain 2 copies of Harry Potter and I see a warning, I put the and in a separate line here. So it becomes clear, an and. And I can also then, in my steps, have a different method where I check if I get that warning. So that's an then with an and. And you can have multiple ands. Similar, you can use an and with a given. Given I have a Silver Frequent Flyer account and today is Sunday, when I fly from Amsterdam to London, I get 450 frequent flyer points. So in this case, this Sunday is important. Probably if you fly on Monday, you get less or more points. Here's an example where I use an and with a given and an and with a then. And in this case, multiple ands. Given I have $100 on my account, my card is valid, the machine contains enough money, that's my precondition, basically 3 things. When I request $20, then, that's my post condition, the ATM should dispense $20 and the account balance should be 80 and the card should be returned. So I basically have 3 things together in my post condition. So I can choose not to use an and, I can choose to use an and, I can choose to use multiple ands. What is the best way to describe your given when then? And then we will see some best practices, but when you want to do multiple things or check multiple things, you use an and. The trick is, you should not use an and in the when. The when is the action that you do. You don't want when I do this, and I do this, and I do this. We've seen in a test you should do only one thing. So there's only one when. If you want to do multiple things, you have multiple tests. Similar as in unit tests, it's also similar here with Cucumber. You can also use a but. An and a but is the same. So here, given I have $100 in my account, but my card is invalid. When I request $50, then my card should not be returned. I could also have written, given I have $100 in my account and my card is invalid, when I do this, then I get this. It works exactly the same. So the and the but are the same in Gherkin for Cucumber. So Cucumber doesn't even look at these names. If it isn't given or a but or an and, it doesn't care. It just does only pattern matching with the sentence, the string, after the given or the but or the and or whatever. But, it's not this but the idea of Gherkin is, your acceptance criteria, your given when then is, write it in the language of the business and it should be as clear as possible. So the best practice is, when something is positive, you use and. When something is negative, you use but. So in this case, this is negative, my card is invalid. If I have the same scenario, but I say I have $100 in my account and my card is valid, when I do this, so when it's positive, the card is valid, then you use an and. When there's something negative, you use a but. But for Cucumber, it doesn't matter what you use. So that's the idea of and but. These 2 scenarios work exactly the same. Only here I say, given I have a web browser on a Google page, I search for Panda, then the results for Panda are shown. The related results include Panda Express and does not include Pandemonium. And here I use but. So the only difference is the last line. Here I use 2 thens. Actually, I use 3 thens here. So that also works. Better would be and then and an and the last is a but. So the last one is negative, it does not include this. This one is an and, it includes this, and after the when I get a then. So the last one reads better, but it works exactly the same. So again, Cucumber doesn't care what you write here. If you write a given, or a when, or an and, or a but, or another then, it just doesn't look at these names. We only use them in the correct way so that our feature file is easy to read. Then we can put on top of a given when then a scenario with a name. So basically we give our given when then a name. It's always called scenario, so you cannot change this. This is really a keyword for Cucumber, and then you can give it a name whatever you want. Here I have simple Google search. Here I have adding the same product multiple times to the shopping cart. You just give it a good name so that later on in your output you can see, okay, I test this, I test this, I test this. And when the test goes wrong, you see, oh, the simple Google search went wrong. That's a scenario. Then we have a feature. The feature is the user story. So typically I create feature files, one file for every feature, one file for every user story. And that feature I'll also give a name, manage the shopping cart, that's my user story. And then as a customer, I want to add a product to the shopping cart so that I can manage all products that I want to buy. And for this user story, I write multiple scenarios. So that's typically what you have. A feature within a feature file with multiple scenarios. Then in a unit test, we saw you have an add before. Do this for every test. Well, that is a background in a feature file. So let's say you have multiple scenarios and they all share the same given. So in this case, given a web browser is on a Google page. And let's say now I have only 2 scenarios, but let's say I have 10 scenarios. All 10 scenarios start with given a web browser is on the Google page. So then I call that a background here. It's also a keyword. You cannot call it differently. It's called a background. So what will Cucumber do when it sees the background? It goes first to the background given this. So it calls that method given. Then it goes to the first scenario. It calls the when and the then. And it goes when it wants to go to the second scenario, first it does the background again, given this, and then the when, and then the then. So it works exactly the same as an add before in a unit test. It's a background. Then, in these steps, in the given when or then, I can have arguments. So in this case, I add the book Harry Potter to my shopping basket. That's an argument. And then that has to match to some string. Now it's Harry Potter, but it can also be another book title. Now what you also can do is using a table. So I have here given the catalog contains the following books, and then I give a table here. There's titles and authors, and I have different titles and authors. Now later on I will show how you match that to a method, but basically up here I choose something specific, Harry Potter. I could do that also here. Given the catalog contains the book with the title specification by example with author Kochko Etsig. But that's only one of the books that I want in my catalog. So now I want a list of books. Well, a list of books you specify this way. Later on I give an example of this. You can also put comments in your feature file. It's just the pound sign, comment, similar as in Java you want to put comments, only you have you don't have the pound sign, but this is comments in feature files. So that's the language Gherkin. So the most important things are the given when thens. Then we have to look, before we can really write these tests, how do we write the steps? So now we've seen how do we write the feature files. Now, how do we write the steps? So the steps that are matched by the given when thens in the feature files. So here, given the user has parked, what I need to do, I create a method. It's always this kind of methods here. It's always it can throw something. And it has an add given. And then you see the string. It starts with this character and it ends with a dollar character. That's an default for features. So an expression always starts with this character and it ends with dollar. So, and it has exactly the same text as I have in my feature file. Then it matches. If you make a typo, it doesn't match. Then you have a method. How that method is called doesn't matter. The name of the method doesn't matter. What Cucumber will do for me, it will create this method for me. It will also create this annotation already for me. And sometimes I have to modify it a little bit, but it is created for me. I don't have to write it all by myself. And typically the default what it does, whatever text you have here, it uses that same text as method name. So these two match now. Then we can have parameters. So in this case, the user has parked for 3 hours. The 3 is a parameter. So how do we match that? It's in a regular expression. It's this one here, any number of digits. So it should also match 33 hours, or 333 hours, or 3,300,000 something. So any number of digits here. And then here I get an integer. So whatever is here, this 3, the integer hours gets now a value 3. Cucumber takes care of that. It says, hey, there is a variable here, or a parameter here. What is it? It's 3. So I call this method and I give 3 as an argument. So for with regular expressions you can do, it's very powerful. We only look at the simple ones. So this is always what I use for integers, any number of digits. The dot plus is for a double. There is somewhere a dot in there. Excuse me. So here I say the user has parked 3.75 hours. Well, here I want my double. How many hours? The 3.75. So that matches with this regular expression. Point plus. So there's a point, there's a dot in there with numbers. Then a string is always dot asterisk. Any number of characters. So here, now I say the user logs in with username Frank. Frank is now my parameter. So this string username now gets the value Frank. And then I can do something with that in my method. Then again, in regular expressions, you can do many things. I just show a few examples. The string that you specify here ends with $. Now, what if you want $1 in your string, in the middle? So that's here. The user has $100, so the dollar is in the middle of my string. So if I put it just as a string here, it says, okay, this is the end of the string. But this $dollar is the end of the string. So what I have to do is here, put a // for it, for special characters. You put a // so it says, okay, this $dollar is just a dollar character. It's not the end of my string. Then, something you should be very careful about, Cucumber doesn't look at the keywords given, when, then, but, and. It doesn't look at these keywords. So in this scenario here, I start with given the user has $100 in his account. And I do all kind of stuff here. I have another scenario. It says given the user has a brand new account and he deposits $100, then the user has $100 in his account. Now, Cucumber does pattern matching. So the method that matches with this string is called. So what do I do in the method? Create an account and put $100 in the account. Well, this string matches exactly the same method. So what will it do? Create an account and put $100 in the account. But what I want to do, I want to assert that method as a account.getAmount, and I want to assert that it is equal to $100. So this is not correct. So you should methods or sentences in a feature file can only be the same if you really mean that they do the same thing. This sentence here does something different than this one. This one does a check, this one creates an account. So you have to be careful that you have different names there, different text. So this given, when, then is not used. Also, these annotations are not dealt with Cucumber. If you put an add then, it will work too. If you put an add when, it will work too. If you put an add and, it will work too. So it only does string matching. And then here, regular expressions here, basically we say the sentence should be, the text should be, I have deposited, but then it can be $100 or $250. That are the two options. So this is basically an OR. This is 3 characters. I have deposited something with 3 characters in my account. So it can be any number in this case, lower than 999, lower or equal to 999. Cannot be 1,000 because that has 4 characters. Here we have 0 or more characters, so that's typically what you use with strings. Here you have 0 or more digits, and a digit is something between 0 and 9. 0 or more digits, so that's typically for integers. Here you have 1 or more digits, so that's a difference. This can be 0 or more, this is 1 or more. Sometimes, like in this example, the text is I have, and then some integer, cucumber in my basket. So that matches with I have 1 cucumber in my basket. But what if you have 2 or 256 cucumbers? Then you say cucumbers and not cucumber. It sounds very weird if you say, I have 256 cucumber in my basket. we typically say cucumbers. So, and then this question mark basically means 0 or 1. So the question mark tells you something of the character in front of it, which is the S. So it should match I have a certain integer, cucumber or cucumbers. Both is correct. That's what the question mark says in my basket. So it's about the S. I can have no S or one S. So both will match. And here's an OR. It's basically an if then else or an if then. Both will work. So here I visit the home page, I go to the home page, I say I, and then the question mark, it can be visit or go to the home page. So both will match this method. Now, I typically always use, let's go back here, this for integers, this for doubles, and this for strings. That's typically what you need. Then you can never go wrong. Well, in Cucumber, in later versions, they also they support Cucumber expressions where you can say int here instead of what I use with the D and then the plus, etc. And this is what you can use for float. This is what you can use for a word or a string. That's also possible. In practice, sometimes you run into problems with this. It does work, but especially if you have two integers or it's somewhere in the middle of the sentence, that sometimes that goes wrong, especially when you use strings and it doesn't know which string should I use in the middle of the word, or in the middle of the string actually. So here, this also works. I have a calculator with int, I add an int, the outcome should be an int, and I multiply with an int. The difference is, this only works if you don't start with that what is it, that quote, oh no, it's not a quote, that thing, the special character, and end with a dollar. You don't have that here. So here, this special character and a dollar, that's where you start with and you end with a dollar. You cannot use that if you use these expressions with int or string or float. Otherwise it doesn't match. This works fine too. Then if you work with lists, so given I'm logged onto Facebook, I select my friends page, I should see the following friends. Well, you don't want to say Bob, Frank, John, and then 3 arguments as a string. But what if I have 4 or 10 or 20 friends? So what I can do then is I specify a list here, like the table we've seen in Selenium or in Fitnessa. Now this list maps, so here you say friends colon, maps to this list here. I have a list of strings. So Cucumber will take care that that list is instantiated, Bob will be added, Frank will be added, John will be added, then it calls this method and you get that list as an argument. And then you can do something with that list. So if you have multiple things like lists, you can do it this way. So now we've seen how Cucumber works, how we write a feature file, how we write the steps, and now we can go actually start already with our lab. You can do the first part of the lab where you write some simple tests. Now there's one more thing. In a feature file, you have something like before, that's a background. There's no after in the feature file. But in the feature file and before, It's basically a background. And that deals with the feature file. What you also can do, and in that background you still have a given. And so it maps to some method where you do given. Now let's say you want to do something special for every scenario, for every given when then. You want to do so, you write something to a log file or whatever. Then you can just, in your steps, use the normal add before and add after what you're used to. So this is only for the steps. So it's called before every scenario. For every given when then, it will call this before. That's different than a background. The background is just a simple way so that I don't have to put the given in every scenario. I just put it in one place. That's all the background is for. This is really when I run it.